Hello and welcome to The Opener. My name is Matt Lees, and this week, unfortunately, I've been trapped in an alternate dimension. It's very warm. I'm not dressed properly, although, however, I am legally required to wear this quantity of clothing at least in the contract that was sent to me by Mr. RP. But really, it's a pretty hellish situation. But thankfully this week, I've got something fun for you to have a look at. I've got part of this. This is the minigame library. Now, the minigame library is a twee little thing that comes with a variety of small card games, all in a pleasing little chest. It's very nice, it's very twee, but I haven't really played that many of the games. And the reason I haven't played that many of the games is because the manual that comes with it was written by robots. I mean, look at this, really. I mean, these are... it's just... There's one game in here, though, that's well worth a look, and that is Infinity Dungeon. Now, Infinity Dungeon is a role-playing game, which means you've got... Wizards? But I am a wizard! No, you're not. That's just me in a dressing gown. Oh, yes. Yes. But it's not about that anyway. Sure, there's some magic and some treasures and some monsters going on, but really what Infinity Dungeon is about is nonsense. You get 2 decks of Infinity Dungeon in the minigame library box, and the idea is you mix these up to make one epic game. A game of Infinity Dungeon lasts about half an hour and just sees you going through individual rooms, and every time you get out of a door into the next one, the place you're in is completely new. Now, this is pure Dungeons and Dragons inspired stuff, like a giant room with a massive fan blowing everything back with incredible force, and everything thrown at it seems to get thrown away by the wind into a wall of spikes. Or a gigantic room full of gold and silver treasure that you have to dig through and somehow find a key. The thing about these situations is that most of them appear to be impossible, but thankfully you've got some interesting help. Firstly, you've got the character cards that people are going to pick up at the start of the game. Now, these are where the game really shows what it's all about. Pop star. That's right, you can be a pop star with a spangly costume and paparazzi and a stylist. Or a postman. If you're a postman, it means every room in the dungeon you visit, you've got to deliver a letter. One of my personal favourites is simply you. You are you, which means you have all of the items in your possession, and any friends that are currently with you at the table are also with you in the world. Every time you enter a new room, you draw 5 cards, and the card at the top is the card with the description of the room, and the rest of them are objects you have. Once you put these 5 cards down on the table, you have a situation where the active player, and they take it in turns going around the table, gets to choose a plan they can submit to everyone else. So let's just say, for example, we're on a bridge of glass, and it's very, very unable to hold any weight whatsoever, but we have all the people, the adventurers with us, maybe a postman, maybe a pirate, maybe a ninja, could be useful. We also have some chicken soup, a toolbox, a shark, a courtesy phone, and a magazine. Now, stuff like magazines is great fun because it has a little asterisk after it, which means that you choose what it is. Is it Hello Magazine? Is it an old copy of PC Zone? Is it Horse and Hound? You're probably starting to get a gist of what Infinity Dungeon is all about, which is why it's important that I mention something. Both the game itself and the logical structure of how it's played are nonsense. Whenever you devise a plan on how to get out of a room, you basically then have a vote. All the other players either put their thumb up and say, yep, good plan, or no, I don't like that plan. I want you to use my pirate cutlass and my infinite bottles of gin or rum to make this plan better somehow. And then you can choose to either go, yes, okay, and get a bonus to the score, or no, and carry on without their points. You then turn over a card and get a completely rudimentary number, which will let you know whether or not you've succeeded or failed. If you succeed, you all just high-five each other and then move on to the next room, but if you fail, your character dies. And the only penalty, really, is that you then draw another card and play as a different character. Infinity Dungeon doesn't actually have any way you can win, and in the manual it just says that the player who had the most fun is the winner, which is the kind of twee nonsense that usually makes me want to crush my own skull. But when you actually start playing it, Infinity Dungeon is fantastic fun. Infinity Dungeon describes itself as being a light-hearted, nonsensical role-playing game, but really, it's not even that. It's all about creating these little stories. You see, role-playing games rely on constants. You have a setting you have to immerse yourself in, you have a character that you have to get into the head of, and you kind of just keep those things flowing. Whereas Infinity Dungeon is constantly disposable. Characters are gone as quickly as they appear, and situations are just immediately forgotten. When I was looking through the manual for Infinity Dungeon, I was terrified. I thought to myself, people are going to hate it. I thought I was going to hate it. It felt like there was no purpose, and I just thought it was going to really, really suck. But it didn't, because the stuff in the manual and the stuff on the cards is irrelevant. Infinity Dungeon is a game about inventing stories, and I've got a remarkably dark sense of humour, which meant the stuff that was happening in our game was absolutely bonkers. A giant swamp monster is blocking anything that goes across this miasmatic mess, so what do? Sail the pirate ship across it, but we'll distract him by cutting up Michael Barrymore into tiny pieces with a chainsaw and chucking the meaty chunks to try and draw its attention away. Admittedly, it was a plan that was suggested by a death cultist whose criteria requires him to sacrifice a human in every room he enters, but apart from that, everyone thought it went pretty well. We also had a situation where we got stuck in a gigantic briar patch full of thorns and nasty stuff, and had to cut our way through it. And of course, the logical situation in that was to give Mr. Blobby all of the weaponry we had at our disposal and send him off into the woods to just hack and slash it to pieces, whilst classically shouting, "Blobby, Blobby, Blobby." Sadly, him and Noel Edmonds were killed in the process, but it was really entertaining. And then we teleported ourselves to the moon in the hot carcass of an elephant, but sadly didn't have enough room for Danny DeVito to come along with us to the next room. Now, the things that I've just said might horrify you, but that's why Infinity Dungeon is ace. It reminds me of when I was back at school and used to get these little question papers that would have a very specific puzzle with a very specific answer, and I always hated that because I don't like to just do the thing the way you're supposed to do it, so I'd always go out of my way to try and fabricate a ludicrous solution that would work. It would work, but it would be funny. It would amuse me personally, and just creating these own little bubbles of fiction in your mind for no sake other than personal amusement. That is what Infinity Dungeon is all about. It's all about just coming up with ideas because they amuse you and because they amuse the people around you. And if you play it with the right set of friends, it's hilarious. But here comes the fairly whopping and important caveat. If you play this with the wrong type of person, you're going to have a really bad time. Infinity Dungeon isn't for everyone, and that makes it a really risky opener. If you've got friends who are willing to just embrace absolute nonsense purely because they enjoy the ride, then they're going to have an amazing time. But if you've got friends who maybe struggle to play any kind of game that doesn't have an evident win condition other than are we having fun, they're really, really going to hate it. Especially because of the way it actually works out whether or not you've completed a mission is based on numbers. It kind of makes no sense. And if you've got people who really thrive on that stuff and people who really attach themselves to numbers and working stuff out, it's just going to melt their brain and they're going to get angry. And this actually happened to us when we played it. I played on a Friday night with about 3 or 4 friends, and 3 of us had an incredible time, but the 4th guy didn't really enjoy it so much. About 3/4 of the way through, he just kind of stopped and said, "Is this almost over?" And that was a realization to me that this is really quite a dangerous game. You pull this out for the right people, and it's a fantastic setup for the rest of the night. But if you bring it out to people who don't play games, and they're not willing to jump aboard your magic carpet of whimsy, then you're gonna really struggle to keep them holding on. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get extravagant with some truly monstrous vodka jelly. Now, the interesting thing about vodka jelly is I've never made it before because it sounds disgusting. First of all, you take your energy cubes and rip them into pieces. You can use a knife if you don't enjoy fun. And then just make sure that you eat one, because that's what my grandma always said you had to do. Next, hot water. To roughly that kind of quantity, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Stir it around until it looks like something's happening. Next, just decant it into another bowl and add some blackcurrant cubes, because you suddenly become worried that it's not going to set. And then put that in the microwave. Once that's all turned into sticky gloop, it's time to add a bit of the old vodka. Now, I've gone for a vodka with Russian writing on the bottle because I'm easily swayed by stereotypical branding. I don't really know how much vodka you're supposed to add to this, but I'm going to go a little bit on the restrictive side because apparently it doesn't set if you put too much in. Carefully decant that into some things And then I'll probably put it in the fridge for a bit, maybe an hour or something. Yeah. Oh God, that sounds horrible. Et voila! Impeccable. The purpose of this is actually twofold. First of all, vodka jelly, for those people who do drink, it will get them slightly inebriated and possibly in the mood for some stupid fun. Do I like some stupid fun? Oh yes, Minister, yes. And secondly, it's a cheeky way of testing the water for the actual game. If you tell people that these are slime monsters and that they have to somehow devise a way of murdering it before they can eat it, then you might be able to get an idea of whether or not people will put up with your game. If people cannot get the idea of a piece of jelly being a monster, and if they look at you as if you're insane, then maybe just don't play Infinity Dungeon at all. Stabbed to death with a cornetto of maiming +2. Yeah. There's actually no reason for me doing this other than the fact that I wanted to buy a cornetto. Anyway, that's the end of the opener for this time. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. I personally can relate to the idea of being trapped into a tiny little universe, unable to escape, seemingly alone, endlessly. Not sure why, exactly. Bye!